It is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George. We're coming off a bye week, so we're still kind of like stewing in our own juices, but there was still a lot to talk about.
Take a shower. Jeez.
No, I refuse. Don't try to change me, baby.
It's the Dubcast stank.
That's right. Well, you probably can't smell it through YouTube, so it's all good.
Oh God.
No, this is staying in. So we didn't have a game on Saturday. I feel like it was a fairly quiet week. As Ohio State goes, fairly uneventful. Basically chalk in the top 25, which rarely happens.
Top 25 upsets.
Yeah. So
the only team that fell out was Arizona, and they played Kansas State, who was already ranked. So
right. So nothing crazy.
And that was on a Friday too. So the Saturday was even more boring than we realized.
I think a lot of people took pleasure in Michigan kind of looking like butt for large sections of their game.
I know you did.
I did. And we'll talk about that. And some other fun Schadenfreude related things. But, let's start with Ryan Day kind of giving some updates this week about how the team is going. Then we'll get into some NCAA ranking stuff with the AP poll and kind of get our takes on that. Maybe check in on some Buckeyes in the NFL. So to start off with, first of all, this is called improvement week, right? Like this is the week where this is the get right week, fix what didn't work in the first couple of weeks.
Ideally you're improving every week.
Well, of course.
And we saw improvement between Akron and Western Michigan.
Actually,
why only improve during the bye week, Johnny? We can aspire for so much more.
Let me ask you this, because I know at the start of last week, I said that I had no notes. A++ would watch again for Ohio State's destruction of Western Michigan, and then I saw some analysis. I saw some reasoned takes. I'm not saying it was like hyperbole or anything like that, where specifically they were talking about Will Howard and his approach to the passing game and how he missed some guys that were open. He obviously had a bomb that he just did not connect on with Jeremiah Smith. So I maybe one note, maybe a couple note or two. I think, and part of this is tempered by the fact that I just think that's who Will Howard is, right? Like, I don't know at this point that he's going to get drastically better as a quarterback. You're kind of just going to have to take the good with the bad. But I do think those are fair criticisms, particularly against a really overmatched opponent. Like, am I crazy for saying that? That maybe that is not a weakness, but definitely not as strong as other parts of the team.
No, but you're correct. It was kind of baked into the cake before the guy even got here that we knew his ability to attack further than 20, 15 yards downfield was going to be suspect. And that was I think the one thing that you could firmly say that Kyle McCord was better equipped to do than him relative to how the offense was going to look this year versus what it was capable of last year. Now, there's a whole facet of different things that Will Howard offers that Kyle McCord doesn't that offsets that. But yeah, if you're trying to nitpick and, come up with areas to improve for a team that has already shown improvement in areas that needed it and strength in areas that we assumed were going to be, stalwart, that's probably the biggest thing relative to Will Howard. Now, that's also kind of one of the hardest things to train up, period. I mean, some quarterbacks have the arm talent to chuck it deep, and some just flat out don't. And completing those balls 20 or more yards down the field, a lot of it comes down to not just arm talent, but also chemistry with receivers, which I think is probably further along, or you're at least more confident in, than Howard's ability to chuck it deep. I know that there was one throw in particular during the Western Michigan game when Ohio State was driving to the south end zone, and he just very, very much short-armed isn't quite the right term, but he just didn't put the kind of like deep touch on the ball to Jeremiah Smith in that area of the field that that we would have liked to see in order to make that a longer completion. I can't even recall if he actually caught the ball or not. But he did still have a better game targeting downfield than he did against Akron. He did complete to the longer, like to the other side of the field, the left, further outside the left hash. He completed two of three passes to the far left, like going downfield. So he was like basically 2 for 4 that game, and I think he went 1 for 3 in the Akron game. So we're talking 3 of 7 on deep throws for
which isn't
Will
terrible.
Howard
I mean,
so far this season.
Yeah,
but it's against 2 MAC secondaries. It's much easier to get comfortable with doing short and medium routes just because you can scheme those up and replicate those in practice in much quicker succession, and there's less stakes involved in terms of making a mistake in the way that there just simply isn't able to compare to when you're doing it in a game situation and you're literally throwing it up and hoping that your receiver is able to come down with it in stride, as opposed to it being
you're guiding the receiver to where the ball's going, and
right.
like you're actually like making the pass as opposed to just hoping that it connects.
The confidence that comes with being able to make those replicable, it only arrives in game situations where you're able to execute on it. So it's just it's a harder thing to get firm confidence with in practice as opposed to doing it in a live situation. And hopefully we're going to see it more as the year progresses, because that's going to obviously just be one more thing that the defense has to be preoccupied with. Otherwise, if defenses are able to figure out through film that, okay, we don't have to respect the downfield threat as much as we have with some other Ohio State quarterbacks in the past, safeties are gradually going to be playing up more, which is going to make it more difficult for running backs to operate in the box or get out to the edge. It's going to create another man to worry about, whether they're playing man or zone coverage when they're throwing those short to medium routes. If they're just more comfortable with playing up closer to the field because they don't have to worry about getting beat over the top, not necessarily by the receiving talent, but just knowing that Howard is probably going to end up short arming it to them even if they do get beat, you just want to see them develop that part of the offense for the sake of keeping the defense honest. I'm not totally convinced it's going to happen, but I haven't seen much reason yet to believe that it's going to, totally compromise the offense in the way that I'm kind of describing in a worst case scenario.
Right. I think what I'm really interested to see is how well Will Howard does in pressure situations. And by pressure situations, I mean literally when he's being pressured, right? Like what he does in response.
I mean, I'm already more encouraged in that regard than I was with McCord.
And I think, again, it's relative to competition, but I remember, Ryan Day saying after the game, he was like, look, I felt like his best play was a rollout where he just threw it away, right? Like he didn't try to make something, crazy happen. He didn't try to like force the issue. He lived to fight another day, and then they resulted in points. And so like that, that's, you want a quarterback. I think especially after seeing a guy like, CJ Stroud or Justin Fields, you want a quarterback who can just roll out and then throw these insane times. And, we've been watching, CJ Stroud do that in the NFL for the past year. But that's not going to get you, that's not going to happen every time. Like sometimes you just have to make the smart play and, maybe use your legs to pick up 3 or 4 yards when it doesn't really matter. And then, when you're CJ Stroud, I think the equations that you do in your head, to figure out which plays, which throws you can make are different than if you're Will Howard. And that's okay. I don't know, what that's going to look like against an elite defense. I also don't know that how many times Ohio State's really going to have to think about that during the year either, so like, that's the weird part about this is because like, Marshall's coming up, right? It's like, okay, well, is that no, it's not another test, so it's like, you've got to wait a minute
I don't
before
know. Do you know the history between these two.
Oh, well,
schools when they play each
I was
other?
actually at a Marshall game, the Marshall game that you wrote about, I believe,
Yeah, I
from
read your
2004.
comment about
Yeah.
your thoughts on it in
Yeah.
my story.
Yeah. And then I was like, wait a minute, I am almost 40 freaking years old.
I was 11. I was 10 going on 11 when that game
I'd
happened.
love to hear that. So so it'll just be interesting to see how he progresses. Some of the other things that Ryan Day talked about, just that they're working on improving, blah blah blah. There wasn't anything groundbreaking here. Was interesting to hear him say that Donovan Jackson was available. They wanted to wait, until he was like fully healthy. But if he had to come in, he could have. They just don't want to have like a pitch count situation. They just want to make sure that he's
Yeah,
full
so
go.
I misspoke last week. I thought he had actually returned for the Western Michigan game, and I had kind of just written that off just because Cody Simon had been available.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I guess apparently he didn't play yet, which is honestly for him not being available and for the offensive line still taking the steps forward that
Oh,
it
yeah.
did is
Yeah,
in
missing their
some
best
ways even
player.
more
Yeah, absolutely.
encouraging than if he had actually been around.
No, I'm definitely down with that. Once they get him back full go, that's a big deal for them. Let me ask you this. So, what's your opinion on Ohio State being a 40.5 point favorite over Marshall this week?
It's the same opinion I have about spreads that I did when we talked about
Yeah.
Akron. A 30-point spread is like ridiculous. A 40-point spread is irresponsible. A 50-point spread is la la land. So
I mean,
yeah,
they covered.
They covered 56-0 against Western Michigan.
Mhm.
That's great. But again, they needed 2 defensive touchdowns, one of which was in garbage time with the backups in order to break 40 against Akron. And
Mhm.
now they're coming in from a week off, so they'll be well rested. You'd expect the execution to be sharper. But I would also expect Marshall to be a more formidable opponent than Akron or Western Michigan.
Are they? Because I
So,
honestly I don't know anything about Marshall. Like, I'm not even going to pretend that I do. Like,
well, they're 2-0 against the spread this season, and
well,
Ohio State can't say that.
okay, then they're the better team, and so Ohio State should treat this as they're the underdog, and they need to prove something to America by winning by.
They were
41
3
points.
touchdown underdogs to Virginia Tech, and they were able to beat that spread even though they still ended up losing. So
Okay.
I would assume Virginia Tech would be able to beat Akron and Western Michigan by that margin at least.
Yeah,
the only other game they played was against Stony Brook, in which they were like 31-point favorites, and they covered that. So they at least, it's like some people say,
you know what?
Good teams win, great teams cover. So
That's
they've
right.
covered in all their games this season, and Ohio State can't say that.
Okay, well, you know what? There you go. So maybe put some respect on Marshall's name.
And you don't think the whole week. I mean, the really interesting thing that I thought about while writing that article about Nugent and his kick was that that was the first time that those two schools had played each other.
Yeah.
And they played each other one other time in the 2010 season. But obviously, those wins all got vacated. So there's really only one officially recognized meeting between Ohio State and Marshall. And it's just really interesting given Ohio State's penchant for scheduling in-state teams that are local. And it's like Marshall is right there.
Yeah, right
just on the other side of the Ohio River.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Only a 2.5-hour drive away from Columbus.
And they've got a lot of like history,
and yet they've
too,
only played a couple times.
I feel like I think they're a worthy foe. I do agree that Ohio State should have, that's a team that they should have seen more often than they had in the past.
But in terms of like, the little guy wanting, David wanting to kill the local Goliath,
right?
That they're going to be talking all week about how we should have had him in 2004. Like, it's going to be easy for them to galvanize the troops in a way.
I did an article. Sorry to interrupt, but I did an article about that 2004 team, and I think in the first half of the season, Mike Nugent accounted for something like a third of all the points scored for the team because he was just kicking field goal after field goal after field goal. Like, they were like, all right, we got to the 40. That's pretty much all we can do. So, Mike, if you can help us out here.
The cool thing I realized about that game that I didn't as a kid, and until I looked back, was that was like the second most prolific receiving performance in Ohio State history before Jackson Smith and Jigba came along.
Hell yeah.
That Santonio Holmes went Marvin Harrison Jr.
Oh yeah, he went bonkers
in the first quarter and had like he had like a $145 and 2 touchdowns on as many catches.
Well, and that's when people still thought like Justin Zwick would be like this masculine superhero, and oh, here we go.
And he was for the first half of that game.
Yeah, and then after that, the wheels kind of fell off, which was unfortunate. But
Troy
anyway,
Smith even got in for a series too that game.
They have
before Zwick started turning the ball over, which made me wonder, like, how long were they doing this platooning thing? Because this was a full year before they played Texas, and that ended up being the reason they lost at home to them.
Troy Smith basically had taken over the starting position, I want to say like maybe 4 or 5 games into the season. Like after that, it was pretty much his to go. And he had been with the team for a while, right? Like he started out as a running back, and then they, eventually let him start playing quarterback. But I just remember that entire season, like going, man, this team like sucks. Like you got Lydell Ross. Like Lydell Ross is like your number one guy. He's averaging like a yard per carry. Justin Zwick can't, not throw interceptions. And then all of a sudden this man named Ted Ginn emerges fully formed out of the ether. And then all of a sudden Troy Smith is like throwing balls, and you're like, holy crap. And, so the end of the season was, I don't know, worth going through all the crap to get there from the beginning of the season. Because that win against Michigan, that was my first Michigan game that I attended, one of 2. And Ohio State, I think, was something like 11.5, 12-point underdogs in that game. And they just beat the crap out of Michigan. And it was awesome. It was really, really great. Shout out to Brandon Joe in the only game he was ever a featured back. And he killed him. It was great. Okay, real quick. We do want to talk about some of the Ohio State players in the NFL before we get to ask us anything. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a quiet, some would say
Marv.
Yeah, speaking of Marv, had a quiet, some would say disappointing first week in the NFL, and I think he would say
it was
himself.
Disappointing. Yeah, as a man that owns Marvin Harrison Jr. in fantasy, I can tell you it was highly disappointing.
Well, and I think he even said that himself, that it didn't live up to his standards. And then he comes out, and in the first quarter...
Well, not only that, it got even more discouraging when his quarterback, Kyler Murray, said something to the effect of, it's not really my job to get him the football and get him his looks.
Yeah,
in terms of trying to like blame it on like a scheming thing with the Cardinals staff. And it's like, are you not the quarterback? Do you not decide who you throw the ball to?
You've got the football, Kyler.
You targeted Greg Dortch like 8 times against the Bills. You didn't. And then of course the clip that everybody showed was, Marv waving near the end zone at the end of the game when he was like wide open, and there's not even another Bills defender in the camera frame, and the Cardinals end up losing like 34-28. Not only that, but people were showing clips of him like kind of lollygagging on plays too, and people were saying, "Oh, he only reached the metric stats say he only reached a top speed of 16 miles per hour during his NFL debut, which is like 379th out of like 400 rookies in NFL history." And Arch Manning against UTSA the next Saturday reached 20.7 miles per hour. How much slower is Marvin Harrison Jr. than Peyton's nephew?
Much slower.
What's going on here? Why did this guy now we see why this guy skipped the combine, because he didn't want to get exposed.
That's right. And then he comes out in his second game and catches 4 passes for 130 yards and I think 2 touchdowns in a quarter. He did that in 1 quarter. So,
2 of his first 3 catches of his NFL career were touchdowns.
Yeah.
So and the 2 first catches of the game.
Better. I would say better.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much what everybody expected when he got into the NFL. It made an immediate impact. didn't really do much at all in the rest of the game. But honestly, that's pretty.
Didn't need to. They were up 24-3. They didn't end up scoring. I don't think more than the Rams. They got injured to hell, but they didn't end up scoring more than 10 points of the game. So Marv outscored them himself in the first quarter, and from there they were just able to.
Yeah, they were done. They coasted.
So it's 2 games into the season. Why show your hand further than that when you've already shut everybody up?
Another Ohio State Buckeye in the NFL who's having a really crazy beginning to the year is J.K. Dobbins, who I kind of forget how long he's been out of Ohio State, how long he's been out of college. I mean, it's been a minute. And he, has dealt with injury after injury. I think was kind of considered not necessarily a disappointment in Baltimore, certainly not due to his skills or anything like that. Just, could not stay off the.
Yeah, he just couldn't stay healthy.
He couldn't stay healthy. Now he's healthy. He is very healthy. And now he's the leading rusher in the NFL. He's had 2 games where he has just annihilated teams. 30-yard runs, 40-yard touchdowns. I mean, just bam, bam, bam. And I saw this really crazy stat where he is the only rusher in NFL history with more than 250 carries and averaging more than 6 yards per carry. That's insane. That is legitimately insane.
Just hasn't been able to stay healthy, which is why he's kind of fallen off the radar of most people up until right now. And if he does stay healthy, he is probably the front runner at this point for comeback player of the year.
Hell, if he stays healthy, he's the front runner for offensive MVP of the year. Like that. I mean, if you can do that for the entire season.
I don't know about that.
Well, I know. Well, I don't know. Look, he's averaging 130 yards.
He's still kind of in a timeshare in that Chargers offense, even though they're going to run the ball a ton just because that's who Harbaugh is.
Right.
He got 1 less carry than Gus Edwards on Sunday. This is. He's still very much timeshare is a strong word. I mean, that's typically when, it's just kind of more of a neutral situation. It isn't as much of an effective offense, but it's still very much a 1A, 1B thing in terms of a split with Gus Bus.
I do think it's funny.
He definitely deserves to take over the volume.
Sure,
lion's share of that load if he can handle it.
Well, I mean, and right now it's working out how they're doing it anyway. So, I mean, why change it? But
I think it's probably a similar thing with how you want to approach the Travion Judkins thing, where it's exactly how good Travion is.
Yeah.
But you've got a guy in Judkins there that's comfortable handling, as many, if not more carries, even if the guy's less efficient. You still want him there just for the sake of keeping the more effective running back healthy and fresh. So Gus is going to necessarily need to eat into the volume of Dobbins. But I mean, the thing that because the big highlight he had on the weekend was the 45-yard run where he did the somersault into the end zone.
It's crazy.
It was funny. The first week he had 2, I think he might have had 2 runs of over 60 yards, but neither of them went for touchdowns. And it was funny because
he was right at the in the.
I was listening to a bunch of football analysts that were like, Dobbins looks great, but it's just he can't finish the home runs. Is there still some kind of lingering issue? What's going on? It's interesting to see him have all this burst and then not being able to finish the playoff for a touchdown. And I'm just kind of there that's been Dobbins since his freshman year at Ohio State.
Yeah.
The only time that I can really remember him ripping off a huge gain that went for a touchdown was the Clemson game in the playoff.
Yeah.
Where his first, I can't remember if he scored multiple times, but he had a 60-yard touchdown in that game where it was finally, he finally didn't get tackled inside the 5-yard line on one of these enormous runs. He was finally able to beat the safety.
You know what I think it is? Short legs. I think he's got short little legs, and the strides eventually catch up with him. So that's my take.
It could be that. But it's interesting because it's the guy would have so much burst out of the second level into the open field and then just kind of slowly die towards the end where it's oh my God, he's just so close to making this an enormous house call. And I saw so many people frustrated with that after the first week this season. I'm like, have you not been watching this player since 2016 the way that I have? Because this is all that happens to Dobbins. He rips huge gains and then doesn't get in the end zone.
I love that he got that touchdown. He hit the flip on it. It was sick.
That was that was the all the frustration of him
Yeah.
not being able to get those long touchdown runs came out in
No.
that flip.
And he's
I was
playing
like,
great.
I finally made it, and I'm going to let all of you know.
Right. And I love that. So awesome on him. Ohio State wide receivers doing great in general. Olave, Wilson both had great weekends, looking very good. I don't know. There's a lot of positive stuff for Ohio State players in the NFL. I'm a Bengals fan, so I don't want to talk about it. But
let me ask you this real quick, because this was it's Monday night when we're recording this. The poll question today at 11 Warriors was, who do you think is the best Ohio State receiver in the NFL right now? The reason I'm bringing this up is, why don't you say who you think it is, and then I will tell you who the top two answers were.
I can't say it's Marvin yet. I mean, I think talent wise, but in terms of like what you've seen, I mean, I would say Olave is probably my guy.
Okay. The second most popular answer is already Marvin Harrison Jr. after that one game.
Right.
Isn't that wild?
That is wild. But that's
the top answer was Garrett Wilson.
Okay, and that's fine.
But Marv was very, very clearly the second answer out ahead of Olave, which I thought was just absolutely mind-shattering.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll end up probably being the best of those three, but it's 2 games, guys. Like, maybe hit the break. And Wilson, honestly, I mean, Wilson's probably the better the better choice, I guess, but he also is the better quarterback. So I would
agree with you. I think Olave is the best.
I think Olave is like an.
And even though Wilson is getting all the glamour because he was like a first-round pick in every fantasy draft this year, and he's got Rodgers throwing him the ball, and people fawn over the chemistry he has with that guy.
Sure.
The Saints are quietly one of the best teams in the NFL through 2 weeks.
Yeah, and Olave is a big part of it.
Well, the biggest surprise has been the offensive line and the running game. And people thought the passing game was going to be okay because people thought Olave was, other than Alvin Kamara, those two were the only salvageable offensive players that the Saints had. And if that entire unit is actually good, that's just going to keep every level of that offense available to it honest in a way that's just going to open things up even more for Olave. So I think he's probably going to have, he's already had, I think, 1,000-yard seasons every year he's been in the NFL. If Derek Carr stays healthy, I mean, even if he doesn't, the early returns on Spencer Rattler, which, I've got my own opinions about the guy from college, but the early returns on Rattler have been encouraging. But if Derek Carr stays healthy and he's able to throw to his top target all year, with how good that offense has been through 2 weeks, Olave's going to have, I think he's easily going to have a better year than Garrett Wilson will with the Jets.
I would agree with that. I actually 100% agree with that. I think it's going to work out to where he would end up being featured more often. I think they have better chemistry. Like, I know people talking about the chemistry between Rodgers and Wilson, but like, I don't know, man. I just think Aaron Rodgers is such a head case, and who knows if he gets hurt again. I don't know. I think the potential is higher for the situation they got in New Orleans. So that'll be cool. Let's do Ask Us Anything. Before we do that, we remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the dry goods store at 11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers, all kinds of great stuff. Check it out. Let's do Ask Us Anything. We want to remind you that you can ask us literally anything by sending us questions to Dubcast at 11warriors.com.
Anything within reason.
Within reason. But no, you can ask us anything. We may not answer everything, but you can ask us anything.
Don't make Johnny cringe with your emails.
I'm no prude. You can do whatever you want. Tell you what, this first one here is from Twitter. This is from Nathan Fast. Nathan Fast, lightning bolt.
Not all of the crypto bros hate us.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Nathan. So game day, you forget your credit card in the car, but realize you have a wrinkled $20 bill in your pocket. How are you spending at the shoes concession stands to get the most mileage out of that Andrew Jackson?
It's always the best is surprise money.
I love surprise money. A surprise 20. I've had a couple surprise 20 in my day, and it just, it just brightens up your whole week. We looked this up because I haven't been to Ohio Stadium like during a game in a minute. It's been a season or two since I've had since I've attended a game. So we looked up the various vendors that they have, the various stands and whatnot. You've got soft pretzels, you've got a walking taco. You've got Dirty Frank's, Hot Chicken Takeover, Donato's, which, okay, fine. Panera. Ooh, Panera. And what was the one that you said you had settled on? I forget.
Oh, I'm getting $20 of Dippin' Dots.
All right, well, there you go. Okay, it's the ice cream of the future. How can you
It's
not?
been the ice cream of the future for 20 years.
I know. That's the best part about it. It's like we're holding on to this slogan as long as we possibly can. Like until people realize it is actually now the future.
Nobody else has figured out how to replicate it.
Nobody's come up with a different ice cream, right? Like, okay, well, they got little balls of ice cream. The gauntlet has been thrown. Figure something else out if you want to be called the ice cream of the future. It's still the ice cream of the future until somebody comes up with something new. I love Dirty Frank's. I think Dirty Frank's is one of the best, like, Columbus area.
You're such
creations.
A company man,
dude. I don't care. I love Dirty. It's great.
Plugging the Dubgate food caterers for your.
And if anybody
donation,
if Dirty Frank is listening, I just want to let you know that I really enjoy it. Now, I did see
they crushed it last year at Dubgate.
They did. It was so freaking good.
Or at least they provided less headaches than the bourbon taps did.
I also saw,
literally and figuratively.
I also saw that there's a hot honey footlong. That sounds insane, but I would definitely eat it. So I guess what I'm saying is, Mr. Fast, is that I am all about the hot dog options. I think that's where my Andrew Jackson is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, we were debating about whether or not any lone food item actually costs a full.
I bet it does.
Andrew Jackson. My guess is if I can get 2 items, I'll probably get a hot dog and some Dippin' Dots.
There you go. So. Okay, cool.
Or I will pay a bouncer to the 1922 club $20 to look the other way while I sneak inside.
That's right. Get all the free food that you can eat. All right, this next one's from John. First of all, a correction from last week, George, which I think we both
I've got a few of them.
Well, that we kept saying the Toledo Mud Hens over and over.
I kept saying that.
Well,
somebody in the comments on the post was, pointed that out. Which,
I should have said something. I didn't think about it. I was like, Mud Hens? Wait a minute.
I had a second cousin that was like a pitcher for them or something. That's so cool. I like that was why they were in my head and why I kept referring to them as such. They are not in fact the Mud Hens, but they are actually. What are they?
The Rockets, the Toledo
Rockets.
Yeah,
okay.
Rockets.
So that's a little bit more aligned with the Power Ranger mascot theme, I think, than, Mud Hens. So, but still, because it's like a guy that would be driving a spaceship or piloting a Megazord, if you will. So, I can
appreciate the people. Appreciate the people who pointed that out, and I feel bad because I do appreciate the our Ohio brethren, Max Schools, all the Zips and Rockets. And
I don't.
Well, that's fair too. Golden Flashes,
Mac holes.
Yeah. While I'm at it, I will ask this question. This is John saying this. Do you have any favorite off-the-wall college team nicknames? One of the cool things about the Buckeyes is that's a unique moniker, not some bird or cat. Division III has some of the best, including several in Ohio, such as the Ohio Wesleyan Battling Bishops, the Heidelberg Student Princes, and the Berlin Yeomen. Any favorites? I don't have a specific one in college football. I love the crazy high school ones, though. There's like, oh my God, there's one, I think it's like the ceramics, because there was this big ceramics plant, I think, in one of the schools in Ohio. There's also I think the Lancaster Sherman tanks, or maybe it's not Lancaster. I think it's like some other place where Sherman tanks were made in Ohio, and they're the Sherman tanks. Ohio has a lot of really off the wall high school mascots, and I really, really love that. And there was one specifically about like, I think it might be the ceramics, and I got to look that one up. But that's the super, super weird, the super, super weird mascots that are like, what the hell is this? That's where I get it.
Tulane Green Wave is pretty good.
Yeah, that's
I like pretty much anything that doesn't end in an S. So that
yeah,
one comes to mind for me pretty easily. I'm kind of struggling to think of some other ones. I've always liked Miami Hurricanes, honestly.
No, it's pretty sweet.
I think it's a pretty cool one.
There is, let's see. I looked up some of these here. So the ceramics is one, so I'm pretty happy about that. I think that's pretty legit. There's the meteors, I like that. The mayhem. Let's see, what's the chips? Which doesn't make any sense.
The Coastal Carolina Chanticleers is another one I like, just because of all the alliteration involved in saying that full name.
And then and also having to say having to say it. What's
I
the?
Don't even know. It's and granted, slugs. It's a bird. Like, he said, no birds or cats or whatever. But if you,
but it's very specific. Yeah,
I don't know what a chanticleer is.
I think it's a chicken. Isn't it like a chicken?
It must be. Yeah, I mean, if I didn't know that their mascot was like walking around like a bird, I wouldn't guess that a chanticleer is a bird. I would guess that that's some dollar store musketeer.
I was going to say, it sounds like some kind of like Frenchman who got executed in the guillotine in the late 1700s.
Yeah.
All right, great question from John. This is from Kevin. When do you think it would be appropriate to look at the college football playoff rankings? I guess when they come out, but like, how many weeks do they have before the end of the season?
No, the only time that they matter is the week before conference championship.
Right. I think that's I think that's pretty much it.
Or after your team loses, if they were previously considered trying to make a playoff run and ranked in the top 15.
Right.
Then I think it's appropriate for you to look at that and say, okay, how much further can they fall if they lose?
I think if your team's
what teams do they need, but more importantly, what teams do they need in front of them to fail to get back into contention?
Right. I think if your team's borderline like that, then you want to pay attention to it. But if you're like an Ohio State fan, before conference championships, who gives a crap? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And even after that, it may not have mattered that much. This is from Bryant, who wants to know, what's one extracurricular you wish you would have done as a kid, and what's one extracurricular you wish you would have stuck with as a kid and didn't quit? I am not musically inclined. I wish I would have found an instrument I liked. I played piano for a couple years and I absolutely hated it. I think it would have been cool if I had found something that I actually enjoyed doing, like, I don't know, guitar or trumpet or some kind of thing. And I really wish I would have stuck with baseball more. It would have interfered with swimming, which I really enjoyed, but that's okay. I feel like I could have done both. I think I did baseball up until I was like 10, 11 years old, and I really liked it, but I dropped it for some other things that I also really liked. And I think ultimately baseball would have been maybe a little more rewarding overall, I guess.
I played saxophone, but I think I gave it up after like 7th grade or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, my big extracurricular was writing. I did, and honestly, when I was in high school, I knew that there was like an appetite for slam poetry, so I kind of just started doing that just because people said I was really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm being totally honest, I never really had it was just one of those things that you do because people say that you're talented. It's right. Who's that Purdue basketball player that played center that got drafted by the Magic?
Oh, and then did not want to play basketball.
And it was just like this guy, and he even was very transparent about just being like, yeah, I'm basically just doing this because people say that I'm really good at it.
I'm 7 feet tall, and that's I'm kind of forced to do this.
I was in the same. I was like, I'll never fault a person in that situation because it's like, yeah, I totally get it because I was in that situation with poetry. It was like people said I was really good at it, so I did it because it was just an easy way to get positive reactions out of people.
Right.
But I didn't my heart was never really all the way in it. So eventually I just kind of grew out of it, but I still was like, okay, I have this ability to galvanize people with my writing. How can I channel that into something that's actually relevant to my interests? And then I realized, okay, this actually would be a good reason to try to pursue writing about sports. The issue is I'm getting started kind of later than most people. and this is like an absurdly competitive space. But I did it anyway.
Yeah.
And so I don't really have a regret relative to childhood or adulthood about extracurricular, just because I figured out like this is probably what I should be sticking with and what I want to do. And it paid off getting to this point and even opportunities further than 11 Warriors. So
Cool.
I'm at peace.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where you got to be at a certain point too. It's like you can't rewind the clock and like, all right, well, I mean, you can pick up anything at any time. I don't want to discourage anybody from saying like, well, if I want to play piano at 43, I can't do it. Like, of course you can. But you can't have regrets about not starting your favorite thing when you were 4. You know what I mean? Like you can't. You're a kid. You can't really put that
Right.
kind of pressure on yourself retroactively. Second question from Bryant. After Michigan's win versus Iowa in 22, Connor Stallions got the game ball, even though he was just some low-level staffer, and Jim Harbaugh didn't know what he was doing. So what's the most random or odd award you've ever received? So I ran the Instagram account for the Columbus Library's book festival page, and I did some other social media stuff and things like that. And after the first book festival that they did a couple years ago, we had the second one this past summer. But after the first one, I got this like shiny plaque, this incredibly ornate thing, like saying like "Thanks for making this," and I was like, "What the hell?" Like it showed up on my desk one day, and I was like, "This is ridiculous," and so I still have it there. It's great, I love it. But I had never received like I was a social studies teacher at a charter school for years. People aren't giving me a like that's not really an awards laden profession, and for somebody to give me a little plaque like that, I know that's more common in the corporate world, but like I had never gotten something like that, and I still think it's super cool. So I always appreciated that. The other thing is, so when I graduated high school, I did not have a great GPA. I did not endear myself in various like academic disciplines to any teachers or anything like that. I didn't get any like major awards, but the one thing that I did do is I spent a ton of time volunteering, like hundreds of hours, just in schools and things like that, after for homework programs and other things like that. And I got a presidential award. And I looked around and I was like looking at the high school senior thing, and I realized that all the students who got the quote unquote presidential award were students who had no other awards. And I was like, yes, I win. I'm the greatest. So yeah, that would be mine too, I guess.
So did we actually need to receive a physical token of our
No, I don't think so.
to
I
answer
think
this question?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Because my answer to this question, and I think it's very possible, because it's crazy. I've already been doing this now for almost a year and a half that I took over for Andy. But so it's possible I talked about this on a previous episode, but when I was a senior at Ohio State, I was a marketing major, and one of the last courses I had to take for that was the senior marketing projects course, and there's always like a different theme for whatever the project is going to be for the semester. Our professor was actually the guy who founded Angie's List and has since gone on to become the dean of the UC Davis School of Business.
Wow.
I think his name is Rao Unava. I'm butchering his last name, but the prompt for the class was it was the College of Veterinary Medicine at Ohio State was considering providing their endorsement to any pet food brand that would take it.
Okay.
So they basically just wanted to find out, like, does Ohio State like have the brand resonance with the Ohio market, where the College of Veterinary Medicine providing its endorsement would have an impact on purchases.
Okay.
And they wanted us to go see if that was accurate or not, and then we'd go prove it. So everybody got put into this. Was like there were two big classes of like more than I want to say probably like 70 students. There were like close to 150 students total taking this course across 2 classes, and everybody got put into courses of 6, except for my team, which was a group of 5. And 2 of the kids in my group were not native English speakers. They were both students from China, and one of them didn't speak any English at all. And like, so it's like, okay, we're already short a person relative to all the other teams, and we have one person that is just not going to be able to contribute to the group and is going to have to speak through this other student from China because they don't speak any English. And I don't hold that against them, but at the same time, it's like that's a tough look for
ups the difficulty in a group.
Well, project. It's at the end of the classes, we all have to give a presentation, and you're going to have to get up in front of the room and speak to everybody, and you don't speak any English. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And then I had one other person in my group that was, willing to help where they could. And then the last person was, total, the most second semester checked out, second semester senior, like major league. Like I'm
you're lucky I'm upright.
I'm zonked all the time and checked out to lunch, and I'm, basically my head's already a graduation person that you can imagine, like basically didn't contribute anything. So sweet. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, my GPA isn't, exalted to the ceiling or whatever, but if there's an opportunity to do well here, I know, like, I got voted to be commencement speaker of my high school. I just said that whole background I have with creative writing and positive reaction from that and whatever. I was like, I know I can do a good presentation here if we, get some stuff of substance to talk about. So I'm really going to try my hardest to, do some good work here. So we hit it pretty hard in terms of getting the data and whatever and putting together a good questionnaire. And then once we get all of the collective data from everybody in the class and we're all reporting off of the same data set, you had the option of either wanting to make a case for why the College of Veterinary Medicine should pursue this or why they shouldn't. And I realized, partially out of necessity of the fact that, we were shorthanded, I was like, it's much easier to make a case for why not to do this and poo-poo on everyone's parade than to make a creative case for why they should do this. Because then the whole other side of that was you got to come up with like the campaign and all the details, and that's more fun. And everybody wants to do that because it's second semester senior. But I was like, I've got 7 different statistically significant data points I can point to in here and extrapolate on why this is a stupid idea. And so that's what we're going to focus on. And that's how we're going to make a good case for this. So we were the first group to present in our section of the class, and the 2 top groups got to then give their presentation to the dean of the College of Veterinary Medicine, the chairwoman of Fifth Third Bank, and a couple other people that were potentially going to be tied to being like investors on this project if they went through with it or whatever. And we were one of the 2 groups that did well enough to get that distinction, and we were among. So that was like that was like the best curricular achievement I had while I was at Ohio State was placing first in the senior marketing projects class. Nice. Especially because when we gave our presentation, it was, and this is where this becomes the, like, in terms of like, because I know the original question was, what's like the stupidest award you've won or whatever. Well, what I come to realize is they wanted a point and a counterpoint for why they should or shouldn't do this. And it turns out we were the only group across both classes that said they shouldn't do this.
Interesting. That's cool.
So by default, we got to go give the presentation, But then they ended up going with our recommendation anyway.
It's like
So
Homer
we
Simpson
advanced to the
said.
championship on a technicality.
There you go.
And then we won the championship.
Default, the two sweetest
Right.
words in the English language.
So I get to say that I placed first in my senior marketing projects course, even though we kind of accidentally did it.
You know what?
Because we were the poo-poo. We rained on everyone's parade and we're the contrarians.
I held a record in the southwestern Ohio swimming district, basically. We're talking like thousands and thousands of swimmers. I held that record for many years, and the reason why is because they only swam the event once, and yeah, because in certain age groups they don't do certain lengths of the pool, so it was
never be broken.
Well, yeah, it was the 11-12 age group, and they were doing like a 200 breaststroke event, which they never do. They don't even really do that in high school most of the time. And they're like, screw it, let's do it for this one big event. And I was like, I can do that. And so I won it. And
we're like, oh my God, only Johnny Ginter is capable of such an athletic
well, the funniest part was
we should never even attempt this again.
That was almost literally true because there were only like 6 kids who even tried it, and 3 of them got DQ'd. So I just beat the crap of the other 2 kids, and I was like, yeah. And my name, they actually had like all the records on this giant like board with like plaques and stuff, and I was like on there for like 10 years. It was hilarious.
That's pretty good.
I won the one time they did it, so that was pretty sick. Last one from our good friend Alvin. On off or bye weeks, do you typically watch football? Yes. Or try to enjoy your Saturdays doing something else? No, I do. We try to, with the family, we try to get out. We try to enjoy the weather, the fall, go do some apple picking, all kinds of fun fall stuff, right? Like, absolutely.
Like, are you kidding? I get paid to watch football. This is awesome.
Well, there you go too. There's nothing wrong with that.
And then when I get my weekends back after I'm not working, I get to go out in the world and brag about the fact that I got paid to watch football. Right. So
there you go. So that's Ask Us Anything for this week. Thank you guys for sending those in. We'll keep answering them real quick because we're running short on time. Let's talk a little bit about the national scene, or at least the extended college football world. Sherrone Moore finally got his contract. 11warriors.com, a little website just between you and me, I think is pretty good. 11warriors.com actually had a pretty good breakdown of Sherrone Moore's contract. Basically says that he cannot be fired for NCAA violations that Michigan already knew about, which seems like a vote of confidence for Moore. I don't know how Michigan's really reacting to the notice of allegations. I don't know if that really kind of can tell you much about it, but it seems to me that they're kind of like, I think they're resigned to their fate. That's honestly how I kind of interpret all of this. It doesn't seem like they're trying to fight anything the NCAA is trying to do. It doesn't seem like they are, tipping their hand in any way that kind of shows that they're reacting to some new information. To me, it seems like they've just kind of said, all right, well, this is how it's going to go, and we're just going to kind of
I think it's just them trying to continue to save face while also giving themselves an out, because their tone around how we're going to fight this, and then the NOA comes out, or they receive the NOA, and then suddenly Ward Manuel is saying, we're going to have to comply with whatever punishment comes through.
Right. Do you think something new will pop out? I mean, okay.
Why wouldn't it? What that there's no other if nothing new was in that NOA, there's no reason for them to change their tone about this.
Right,
and that's why I think the way that they've worded the contract, where it's like anything that was in the existing allegations as we knew about it when they came to light last year, we're not going to be able to fire you for cause with that. But
they're also saying
there's new things that emerge that are attached that we maybe potentially received in the NOA. That's something that
I don't
we
think
could
that's the correct reading of it.
I think
what the contract says is that if there's anything prior to the contract being signed that Michigan knows about, that includes the NOA, then Sherrone Moore can't be fired for cause for that. If something else pops up after signing the contract, then yes, he can be. And so that's why I'm saying that I think Michigan has essentially been like, all right, well, whatever. We're just going to deal with whatever happens, and then we ride or die. And he's not getting paid some crazy exorbitant sum. I mean, he's making a pretty good chunk of change, but it's not like he's getting paid $10 million or something stupid like that. I don't know. It's just interesting to see how this kind of will all unfold going forward. Also, speaking of Michigan, they've decided to make the switch officially. Alex Orji is going to be their starting quarterback against USC.
I know Johnny's very excited.
Oh my God.
That.
And you know what? Davis Warren, it's really funny because like he completed all of his passes last game. 3 of them just happened to go to, to Michigan's opponent. Like, and that's unfortunate. It went to Arkansas State, and that he threw 3 interceptions to freaking Arkansas State. But I think he's got arm talent. It's just that they have not let Alex Orji throw the ball. I don't. No one knows.
Isn't Loveland injured now too?
So Loveland is like, it's kind of a black box thing, right? Like we don't really know exactly what his deal is. Some people think he might be day to day. Some people he might be out for an extended period of time. I think it'll be one of those game time decisions that he may or may not play for. If he's out, I don't know who Alex Orji is going to be throwing to.
Yeah, that's my point. Is that it's
like
an
Donovan
interesting
Edwards,
time to promote that guy when you're potentially losing your best pass catcher,
exactly,
and probably overall offensive player.
Exactly, and especially a guy who's like your safety net, right? For a quarterback who has thrown, I think, like now 7 passes in college. It's really weird. I think USC is going to smoke them just because they're not going to be able to stay on the field long enough on offense to give their defense a rest, and eventually USC is just going to start piling up touchdowns. But plus, USC also has
they aren't favored
now
by more than a touchdown right now. It's a pretty close game, although what's funny is they opened as 5.5-point underdogs, and in the same way that Ohio State has swelled out to being like 19-point favorites when they opened as 9-point favorites over Michigan. The line for USC Michigan has since flipped, where now USC is favored by something like 5.5 or 6 points.
I think that's going to go up. As the week goes on, and especially if
that would be great after the news that Orji has been started, if the line only gets even bigger.
Well, and if they say that Loveland's out, like if they say that at some point, they probably won't. But if they officially like say Loveland's out, then you're going to see that go way up. Also, I think America needs to start getting ready for Indiana Hoosiers as a college football playoff team. How about that? Not really. I mean, it feels like every year they start out like really good, and then they get ranked like 14th or 15th, and then they lose the last 5 games.
The early returns on the Signetti era have been good, but
I mean, he rules as a human being. He's awesome, right? Like he came into like that job basically saying, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. You all suck," and that's hilarious and awesome, especially at a place like Indiana. You need to have that attitude. I want him to be good. I don't want him to, be good enough to compete with Ohio State, but I think it'd be really funny if they ended up sneaking into a college.
We've made the comparison before to the Big Ten being a bucket of crabs. And
right.
It's just
it's
like
right.
Even the teams that look like they're going to be good that aren't in that Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan realm, just have a way of getting dragged down by the other teams that are like, we're not good, but we love to spoil your fun.
Yes.
And there's going to be plenty of opportunities for Indiana to blow games like that, even though they ran over UCLA. They scored like 80 something points against some who are they playing?
Team you never heard of.
They're playing like Indiana State or some FCS team. I don't know. So it's like, they've blown out the teams they're supposed to blow out, and they beat up on the carcass of the Bruins. But when they get into these weird situations against these Big Ten teams where a lot of these teams that get this kind of hype about jumping up into that upper echelon of the Big Ten every year then end up kind of stumbling back.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how they handle that. But obviously the early returns of Signetti have been pretty solid.
And here's the thing. So they've got so it was the team they put up a 77 spot on was Western Illinois, which is a team that exists apparently. They got Charlotte next, which is, okay, that's fine.
They're technically FBS.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Maryland, Northwestern, And Nebraska, Indiana might actually be appointment viewing on October 19th. That might
Do they play
actually.
Northwestern at the Lake, as they're
Yes,
now
they
starting
do.
to call it?
They
Okay,
do.
see, that's exactly my point. Like, that's
Right.
exactly the kind of game where Northwestern is like, you've had your fun,
Yeah, right.
and now we're going
This is
to
going to be one
make
of our 3 wins, and you're
you're
deal
going to
with it.
lose 9-3.
Yeah.
That's the way this is going to go.
That's right. We're going to just sit on your chest and hit you in the face like Ralphie from A Christmas Story beating up Scott Farkas.
What a reference.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how I imagine Northwestern beating any team. So yeah, that'll be. I hope they continue being good, but I'm kind of with you. I think they're going to fall off probably. And then just a few other like really like weird, disappointing things. Florida looks like Billy Napier is on the way out. Florida boosters are trying to get rid of that.
Yeah,
dude.
I'm kind of surprised he didn't actually get canned yesterday because I wrote about
he was
that.
Gonna. I seriously thought he was going to.
It was like the boosters are like, yeah, we're ready to pay this guy's buyout, even though it's
Yeah.
going to be like $30 million. I almost brought that up when you were talking about Sherrone Moore because you were like, it's not like he's getting paid some exorbitant amount or that his buyout is ridiculous. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, this isn't a Billy Napier situation where it's like
or a Norvell situation.
$30 million in guaranteed money or whatever potentially involved. It's like, right, on top of whatever they had to pay Dan Mullen to kick him out and, go be an ESPN analyst or whatever. So they but even then, like Florida hasn't had a winning season since they hired Napier. And they're 1-2 to start this year.
And they look like crap. They look terrible. And they have a guy in Lagway who is legit. Like he has really, really great talent. And he's surrounded with nothing. I mean, nothing. And it's wild. It's kind of crazy how things have done.
Yeah, they got shut out in the first half at home against Texas A&M. And now they're favored to go to Mississippi State and win this weekend. But I have to Mississippi State is a home underdog. I mean, when your coach is like facing this much scrutiny in terms of like, yeah, the boosters are basically ready to kick this guy to the curb. I think there's a very, very realistic scenario where Florida ends up starting out 1-3 and their only win is over Samford.
I don't know. Mississippi State, didn't they just get skunked? Who beat the crap out of them last week? I don't know. Anyway, Georgia.
I'm not saying Mississippi State is good. I'm just saying the situation is tumultuous enough where
I got you.
It could be enough of a distraction where they end up with egg on their face in even more pronounced fashion than last week.
Georgia just barely slipped over Kentucky. Georgia looked bad the whole game. I mean, defensively they were fine, but like offense, they could not get anything consistently.
A lot of really silly penalties too. That kept Kentucky in that game competitively for most of it.
Well, and honestly, this loss I think is so much on Kentucky. Like a lot of times people will look at this and go, okay, well, it was just Georgia not playing well. Kentucky really blew it. They were the better team that night. They could not convert touchdowns when they needed it. They were getting field goals instead of touchdowns. Stoops, for whatever freaking reason, was like, all right, well, we're not going to go for the win here. He refused to go for it on fourth down and wasted a ton of clock and allowed Georgia to get right back into it. Just dumb stuff all around. Bad decisions, couldn't execute. And it sucks because that's the kind of, upset that you want to see in college football, but you unfortunately just so rarely actually get to see, which sucks.
Still encouraging for everybody given, they were last season, they carried over that aura of invincibility that their defense galvanized them with in the 2022 season.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they kind of tripped up at the finish line against Alabama and ended up just narrowly missing the playoff, and then went and beat Florida State 56-0 in their consolation bowl.
Well, yeah, because Florida State was like, well, we're not playing in this.
Yeah, so the narrative for them coming out of that game was that we were, the team that was wronged by one really silly result, and we're really still just as good as we've been the last 2 years. And this game definitively proved that really is not the case. The defensive pieces are still there, but the offense is not nearly, Stetson Bennett ain't walking through that door. And it's wow, was the mailman really that much of your glue guy to keep the wheels from coming off? So it's
we'll see how they perform going forward. And they got, in October, they got that Texas game. That's going to be a wild game for both teams, I think, in terms of trajectory of how they, where their season goes.
SEC is real interesting suddenly.
It is. And the other thing I want to say here real quick, this is probably one of my favorite stories, is just Florida State just being complete ass. There was a tweet that I saw. Florida State is the first team in AP poll history to start a season in the top 10 and then go 0-3 with all 3 losses against unranked opponents. So that's bad. And in part of that's on the AP for ranking them top 10. I mean, they lost a lot. I don't know.
That's why I said the rankings don't matter for the first 4 weeks.
But it is kind of fun.
Deserve to be ranked, and look, they're playing Cal this weekend. I think Cal might be 3-0. Yeah. I know they at least beat Auburn in a game they really weren't expected to. So I know Florida State's favored to win by like 4 points. Yeah. But there's a very, very realistic scenario where they start 0-4.
Yeah, vibes are off in Doak Walker Stadium. I think that Cal's got a really good chance in that game, and I really hope that they win because they've been memeing on people really hard.
Miami's the best team in that state again. It's kind of crazy.
That is crazy. Right? That is crazy. But you know what? We're all, we're reliving the dream of the 80s, I guess. So that is the Dubcast for this week. Thank you guys for listening, sending in those questions. We'll keep answering them. And we've got a football game to talk about. Hooray! So we'll be back next time to break all that down. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.